Alright, let's go over Evasion and DR for the Ninja. We'll go over the gear setups for both, some standard ones, some differences between them, the pros and cons for each, and Succession and Awaken, and what to expect running either of them. Let's begin. Alright, let's start with DR. Right, so this is a pretty standard DR setup. We're just running AP artifacts, Anuva, DR gear, so DR boots and gloves. We've got AP crystal set, this is just human damage, pretty standard. And then we'll be able to check our AP out. AP at the moment is 705, 709 awakening, right? So the way we look at the DR is, if you're running that, you can deal more damage because you have higher AP. You don't have to give up things for, let's say, evasion crystals and evasion artifacts and lightstones, right? So you're able to blow people up a lot quicker. Let's say you do Serpent. That will kill a lot of squishy people if you have a good amount of AP. And in a DR set, it allows you to have a high amount of AP. Now, what DR does is when somebody attacks you with their AP, let's say they have 700 AP and you have 600 DR. Your 600 DR negates 600 of their AP. So they're essentially hitting you with 100 AP worth of damage, right? Now, we don't have to worry about the math. You can go look at the Google Docs for it if you want. But what DR does is every time you get hit, it reduces the amount of damage you take from each hit. The problem is, while that sounds like it should make you tankier, it doesn't really work, especially when you have multiple people hitting you at the same time. Now, when multiple people hit you, sure, they might be hitting you for slightly less damage based on your DR, but there's multiple people hitting you, so you're going to take a lot of damage really quickly because all that damage goes through, it hits you, right? Unlike Evasion, where they get misses, and for every miss, they've negated 100% of the damage of that attack, because it deals 0, right, if they miss you. So the good thing about DR is you'll deal more damage. It gives you the option of a hybrid build as well. So you're able to run, say, 2 Omis here, 2 Dawns, a Turo, a Luna, whatever you want. Now, that gives you the option to also fight evasion targets. So now you can fight and kill DR people, you can fight and kill evasion people, potentially. Right, so it's a jack of all trades, it kind of covers all bases. But in a 1v1 I think it's good, in a 5v5 I think it's pretty decent. As you start to get higher, 10v10 and higher, Node Wars, Siege, Open World, GVGs, things like that, DR becomes much more difficult to play because for every person around you, you're taking a ton more damage. You can't survive going through the fight like this and doing things in the middle of the fight. On DR, when you've got too many people around you, you'll just die in your SA. You won't be able to trade damage, right? Another good point is Katana Shower, for instance, on Awakening. When you do a Katana Shower, it doesn't seem like a long time, but that SA, where you're standing here for, a second, that's enough time to die in your SA. And you'll find on a Ninja a lot, you will die in the middle of any stationary attack like that while you're DR if there's a lot of people around. So that's what you try to avoid with Evasion, but these are the benefits of DR and the cons of DR, right? Now let's move on to the Evasion. So an evasion set will look something more like this. Excuse the muskins that I have my fucking flame for this set. Then we've got the Dans. These would obviously be Aetors in the green variant as well, so the evasion variant. And then we run a Kudum. This is a pretty standard gear setup at least. You can also start going with the Sissels or the Centaurs. That's diving further into evasion. I'm not going to go into the specifics of each build or anything, but this is a pretty standard setup. You'll change your artifacts and lightstones to evasion ones. So in this case, we're looking at untouchable set on the all evasion artifacts, and then crystal page. Right, so the crystal page there, you're giving up some of those AP crystals, the human damage crystals, for things like half ears, bitterness, hate, whooms. Takes up a large portion of the set, right? Now in my case, these are flex slots, these 3. I choose to run 2 Vipers and an RBF Viper. I just want the extra accuracy. But you can run whatever you want in something like that. Again, I'm not going to go into crystal builds. But the benefits of evasion. Now, similar to DR, how DR makes you tankier in theory when everyone hits you, evasion makes you much more tankier because you still do have DR. You will be reducing their damage less than you would if you're running full DR. But for every attack that they miss on you due to your evasion, you take 0 damage. So you've negated 100% of the damage of that attack. Which means that when you're in a 1v1, if they don't have accuracy, you basically win that fight. If you're in a 5v5, they might not have accuracy, and it makes it a lot easier for you. But the real noticeable part, for me at least, is, and the reason that I swapped over to this, in larger scale, so 10v10, 20v20, anything like that, uncapped GVGs, you can actually survive moving through the fight much more than you can. You can do your katana shower and not expect to die in the middle of it. When you're using your SA attacks, you're not expected to get blown up while you're using them. And that's a big win for evasion, right? Now with Ninja, you still have a lot of burst damage, so your Serpent's still going to deal a lot of damage, not as much as DR, but it's not like you don't have the damage to kill somebody, right? With the evasion setup, it just allows you to be in the fight longer. Sure, you will get knocked down and you will be able to get up sometimes because they can't hit you, things like that, but that's not while we run it. You're still not trying to get CC'd, you're still trying to play as perfectly as you would on DR. The difference is while you're in your SA attacks, while you're moving through the fight, while things are residually hitting you from all the AoEs on the screen, you're not just dying before you get a chance to do anything, right? So that's the real benefit of evasion. If you get CC'd, you still expect to die. Sometimes you won't, but expect to die, alright? We're on the ground, we're getting full comboed by 1 or 2 people. Fair enough, you die. It's really about while you're standing. You don't want to be dying standing, which happens in a larger scale on a DR class. Alright, so for both Awakening and Succession, we do have evasion passives as well. Right, so for Awakening and Succession, we have Killer Training, 0.5% per point. This stacks up to 15%. Right, so we're going to have 15% evasion rate. On Succession, you also get access to this, which is an extra 5% evasion rate. So effectively, we have 15% evasion rate on Awakening, like so, and then on Succession, we'll have 20%. That does stack with our smokescreen. So smokescreen will give us an extra 9% evasion rate. That's for both Succession and Awakening, right? So that would effectively bring this up to 24%, and then that would be 29% on Succession. So we do also have good evasion passives, which make it viable for us to run evasion and not worry about it. We are a class that can run both DR and evasion. Now, obviously for PvE and things like that, you just still run your DR set. PvE on DR is just much better. You don't take as much damage from mobs. There are some spots, especially these days, I think they're nerfing some spots accuracy, so you can run evasion there as well. But if you have both sets, grind in DR. Ideally, I would always say have swaps. So like I have here, I'm building a second set rather than just swapping these ones over, even though they're already at silent. I might swap those over later, whatever, right? With evasion, you do have the option of going the evasion offhand as well for extra evasion. You have the option of going the Kita if you need to have more accuracy. Let's say you come up against another evasion player in a 1v1 and neither of you can hit each other. It's just, you know, 2 wet noodles smacking each other until you walk away. If you put on the offhand, you might have a chance of beating them and you might have the upper hand. So I think it's always worth having the 2 offhands, the evasion offhand and the accuracy offhand, alongside your Kudum and your Nuva. Right? So these are really the differences about evasion and DR. I feel like for Ninja specifically, it's pretty useful to have the evasion for those larger scale fights. It's almost impossible to survive in a massive group of people as DR, at least for me. You've also got a couple of things like Katana Shower Call. You wouldn't really take this if you're DR. It puts you in place for too long for you to be relying on that as a CC. If you're in DR, you're standing still for so long, you're just going to get killed. In evasion, however, you can use it as a big AoE CC and not worry because you're not going to get blown up while you're standing there in it. So I think those are the best pros and cons for each DR and evasion on ninjas. You have the option of running both. If you do find that you're in RBF or in uncapped node wars, uncapped GVGs, just open world PvP in general, even just BA sessions, and you find that you're getting blown up way too quick, have a look at evasion, because I was running DR up until quite recently. I did have a conversation with Block Jump and Yellow about it, both top tier ninjas, and they suggested running evasion, and it's changed my gameplay completely. So I hope this has helped. I will be releasing an accuracy build guide and an evasion build guide at some point, but that's not what this video is about. Enjoy!